Not too long ago, I gave you guys a look at the new wheel tire setup on my Tundra, and I'd gone with a set of Relation race wheels, RR7s in a 17-inch wheel size, and then wrapped them in a set of Yokohama Geolandar 35 by 12.5 R17 tires, and the truck looked awesome. Completely transformed the look of it, gave it a really aggressive stance. And while they looked awesome, there were a number of compromises that I wasn't willing to live with, and so I actually pulled the wheel tire setup off shortly after putting them on and went back to the stock 20-inch wheels wrapped in these 35 by 12.5 R20 mud train tires. The first compromise that I wasn't willing to live with was the weight of the new wheel tire setup. I was shocked to see how much heavier they were than this setup, especially since this setup is already fairly heavy compared with your stock tires. Again, this is a 35 by 12.5 R20 mud train tire, significantly heavier than the stock tires. But even so, with a single wheel tire, you're looking at about 50 pounds with this setup. With the new setup, just over 100 pounds, which means that in total, 400 pounds of wheel and tire at the four corners of the truck. And not only is it just 400 pounds of weight that you're carrying, but that's 400 pounds of weight that you are spinning. So that is a lot of weight going from this setup to the new setup. I was shocked to see that the difference in wheel size would make that much of a difference in weight. The second reason that I took off the wheels and tires may have had a little bit to do with irony. I'm not entirely sure, but almost immediately after putting the new wheels and tires on the truck, I noticed a leak under the truck. Turned out that both of my front axle seals were leaking. Now, I'm not entirely sure, but I thought, well, maybe doubling this weight of the wheel and tire setup, all that extra strain that it was putting on the axle potentially could have caused the leak. I do have a friend that's a mechanic, and I asked him about it. He said that he'd never heard of axle seals leaking after putting heavy wheels and tires on, so I'm not entirely sure that's the issue. And then also when I took it into the dealership to have the axle seals diagnosed, they blamed it on the leveling kit. They didn't mention anything about the wheels and tires. So I'm not entirely sure that that was really anything to do with the axle seal leaks, but I couldn't help but be a little bit skeptical. The next reason was the very noticeable impact that these heavy wheels and tires had on the power output, or the available power output of the truck. It seemed like the truck was working a lot harder to spin these 100-pound wheels and tires at all four corners. Previously, before putting this new wheel tire setup on, the truck seemed very responsive, even with the 35-inch mud train tires. With the new setup, I found that when I was accelerating from a stop, it would usually rev up to 2,000 or 3,000 RPMs before the truck would even begin to move. So it was struggling, working a lot harder to just get that momentum going. It was also very noticeable at highway speeds when accelerating hard or going up steep inclines. And so just having that impact that it had to the overall power available, it was a downside in terms of just having that power available. And again, it also seemed like it was just making the truck work a lot harder than it needed to. This next reason shouldn't be too surprising given the fact that I already mentioned that the new wheels and tires are a lot heavier and that there's a very noticeable impact to available power, and that is fuel efficiency, which is my biggest complaint about the 2022 Tundra already, and I only made it worse. Even with the stock wheels and tires, fuel efficiency on the new Tundra is pretty poor. These 35-inch tires certainly didn't help anything, and then going to the 17-inch wheel just further exacerbated the situation to the point that I was getting about 13 miles per gallon with that new setup. Terrible. Makes the 16 miles per gallon that I get with this setup seem a little bit more bearable. The fifth and final issue was rubbing, and with these stock wheels and a set of 35-inch mud train tires, I had absolutely zero rubbing, even in off-road driving situations. But the new wheel tire setup had a zero offset, which gave it a very aggressive stance, and made it look really nice. Unfortunately, that meant that I got a lot of rubbing. And you can see I did quite a bit of cutting here of the inner fender liner to make those wheels and tires fit. Likewise, did some cutting up here at the front. And even with all that, I was still getting quite a bit of rubbing. Now, it's very possible that could have been resolved if I had continued to cut more of that. The one thing I wasn't quite as sure about with this piece of the chassis right here, which I never saw the tire in contact with, but it seemed to be very close in certain situations, and I was concerned that in off-road driving, they may come in contact. So obviously that would be a lot more involved to get that out of the way, either cut down or hammer it out of the way. And so it's just one more piece, you know, between the inner fender liner, that and all of the other drawbacks that I was seeing with this wheel tire setup, just one more reason to go back to this wheel tire setup. So while I really like the aggressive stance and the appearance that I got with the RR7s and the Geolanders, to me, those 5 compromises weren't worth the trade-off. And I decided to go back with the stock wheels and this set of 35-inch mud terrain tires. They don't look as good, but they still look pretty good, and the performance is a whole lot better. There is a chance that I'll go with a different set of wheels and tires down the road. Relations Race Wheels is actually working on a set of 18-inch wheels with a positive offset, and so maybe that would take care of some of the issues that I ran into with the 17-inch setup. I would definitely consider those, and I'm always keeping my eye out for other options as well. So there's the story behind how I went from this wheel tire setup to that tire setup and back to this one. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and for more videos of the 2022 Tundra, be sure to subscribe. In the meantime, thanks for watching.